Hi and welcome back to Classic MGB. Now, in October 1965, the Mgb-Gt was launched at the Earl's Court Motor Show, and the MG stand featured the legendary split Mgb-Gt, now on display at the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. Coincidentally, I was born on the day it was launched to the public, so it's always had a special place in my heart. As we'll both be marking 60 years on the planet, I thought it was a good time to celebrate the history of the Mgb-Gt by taking a deep dive into the background and how the car developed in its 15-year production history. I'd like to thank Graham Jenner for the superb illustrations used in this video. They're available online from Classic Vehicle Prints, where you'll find a wide selection of classic prints, including lots of MGB variants. The link's in the description below. I'd also like to thank Pete McHugh, the well-known GT expert and owner of one of the best Mark I GTs we've ever seen, for his help in producing this video. And I should also say that we've relied very heavily on Anders Klausager's superb book, Original MGB, for a lot of the detailed information. That said, we can't hope to cover the detail in the book. There's fully 9 pages of tiny type, detailing pretty much every change to the MGB from 1962 to 1980. This book is a must for any MGB fan that wants to learn about every nuance of MGB production, and there's an Amazon affiliate link in the description. Amazon does pay us a small commission if you use the link, but it costs you exactly the same. Sadly, Anders passed away in July 2025. His encyclopedic knowledge of classic cars, and the MGA and MGB in particular, was probably second to none, and he will be much missed. The 1960s was a time of hope and excitement. The Beatles song Yesterday was #1 in the US charts, whilst Ken Dodd's Tears hit the #1 spot in the UK. The British car industry was leading the world. Following the post-war export or die initiative, firms like MG were booming, and following in the footsteps of the iconic MGA, the MGB Roadster, launched in 1962, proved to be even more successful, especially in the United States. Quite ironic, given that many believe the car was eventually killed off by the stringent US safety and emissions standards. But that came much later. It's often said that John Thornley and Sid Enever would have preferred to launch the GT ahead of the MGB Roadster, but public demand for the MGA replacement ensured the open-top car came first. The design of the MGB Roadster was groundbreaking, as it was the first MG to do away with a chassis and instead use monocoque construction. However, the proportions that worked well for the Roadster were more difficult to adapt to a coupe body. Apparently, one of the objectives for the GT that was laid down by John Thornley, head of MG at the time, was to produce a high-quality enclosed sports car that was sufficiently civilised for executive transportation. This desire to make a car suitable for a managing director is perhaps why the GT began to be dubbed the poor man's Aston. The main challenge was that the depth and angle of the Roadster's windscreen didn't lend itself particularly well to a coupe design, and it took Pininfarina, in collaboration with MG's own design team, to come up with a deeper windscreen that enabled the beautiful coupe body. Many years later, Road & Track named the GT as one of Pininfarina's 16 most beautiful designs that aren't Ferraris. Under the skin, the original car was very close to the Roadster, with just a few changes. The addition of a steel roof added about 100 kilos to the weight of the car, which adversely affected the acceleration, although the more streamlined shape yielded a slightly higher top speed. The extra weight also required uprated rear springs and a front anti-roll bar to ensure the handling was up to scratch. Of course, the body shape and the hatchback certainly enhanced comfort and luggage space, making the GT considerably more practical than the Roadster, at the expense of true top-down motoring. This was partly mitigated as the GT was offered with a dealer-fit folding vinyl sunroof, often referred to as a Webasto. In fact, they were one of 3 brands available, along with Tudor and Britax. Interestingly, the GT had a rear bench seat, although it was only really suitable for very small children or perhaps an adult sitting sideways if they were prepared to be pretty uncomfortable. The Mark I GT was launched with a tube-type Salisbury rear axle, 7-leaf rear springs, front anti-roll bar and several more minor changes from the Roadster. A few new colours were added exclusively for the GT that are now rare and highly sought after: Grampian Grey and Sandy Beige. And interestingly, whilst chrome wire wheels were optional on home market GTs, all export models featured them as standard. With production starting in the autumn of 1965, just 524 cars were produced, of which 350 were for the home market and 174 were exported. As production ramped up, 1966 saw 10,241 cars leave the factory, and unlike later years, 3/4 of the cars were exported. This figure increased to 11,396 cars in 1967, before the Mark I was replaced by the Mark II in December. There were a lot of changes made on the Mark II. These included the electrical system being changed to negative earth, with an alternator replacing the Mark I's dynamo, and a pre-engaged starter motor, as well as a revised 2-speed wiper control. The gearbox was updated, with synchromesh being added to first gear, whilst the optional overdrive unit was now an LH model rather than a Type D. There were updates to the body as well, including a bigger transmission tunnel, changes to the doors and floors, as well as the addition of safety-type interior door handles and window regulators. 1969 also brought the unloved British Leyland plug hole logo on either side of the car, a feature which many have chosen to exclude on restoration. More significant changes were introduced to the US export models, as the emissions legislation that would eventually sound the death knell for the MGB began to bite. This included a revised cylinder head fitted with air injectors on the right-hand side, fed by an air pump. Whilst the Mark II fascia for non-US models was very similar to the Mark I, the US models featured significant changes, including separate oil and temperature gauges, smaller 80mm speedometer and rev counter, and a padded dashboard in front of the passenger, which became known as the Abingdon pillow. Also, a collapsible steering column and revised steering wheel were fitted. 1971 saw more revisions to the MGB, including Ross-style wheels, rubber-faced overriders on the front and rear bumpers, with fabric upholstery being replaced with vinyl. Fascia changes included twin fresh air vents in the centre, whilst rocker switches replaced the toggle switches, and a heated rear window was available for the first time as an option on the GT. A new full-length centre console was introduced that extended between the seats, and included a new radio aperture, new gear lever gaiter, and a hinged armrest with a cubbyhole beneath. All North American cars were now fitted with evaporative loss control equipment. American legislation also prompted the development of the experimental Mgb-Gt, named SSV-1 in 1972. This was a one-off prototype based on a standard GT, but extensively modified to showcase several safety features. These included a 120-degree rear view system featuring a periscope, airbags, anti-lock brakes, impact-absorbing side panels, and even a sobriety testing computer. All things that are fairly standard on modern cars, except perhaps the sobriety testing computer. The car can be viewed at the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. More changes came along for the 1973 model year that included the honeycomb grille, new gear knob, revised steering wheel, red and silver MG badge with pre-1970 design front grille. There was a new tailgate badge of the wing design, and the heated rear window became standard. December 1972 saw V8 GT pre-production begin, with the Buick lightweight V8 being shoehorned into the now lengthened engine bay. This was done by bringing the radiator mount forward. Production started in earnest in April 1973. The power of the V8 certainly helped the Mgb-Gt compete with cars from other manufacturers, and British Leyland were quick to exploit this performance in its launch advertising, comparing the MGB with the Reliant Scimitar, Datsun 240Z and Alfa Romeo 2000 GTV. Although the V8 did have different wheels and subtle V8 badging, Many considered it to be too similar to the standard B-Series GT, and it's possible that this contributed to the car's relatively poor sales volume of only 2,591 units in its 4-year production run. There was also greater demand for the same engine for the Range Rover. This and the oil crisis at the time probably hastened the demise of the BGT V8. That said, an original factory V8 is now hugely desirable, with even V8 transplants commanding very high prices. Meanwhile, back in 1973, August saw the launch of the 1974 model year changes, the last major revisions of chrome bumper Mgb-Gts. Changes included the automatic transmission option being removed from 4-cylinder models, the fitting of hazard warning lights, inertia reel seatbelts, and a brake servo on home market cars as standard. Of course, the most significant changes to both the MGB Roadster and GT in their lifetime happened in 1974 with the 74.5 model year. The major change was of course the addition of rubber bumpers as a result of US legislation. In fact, they were actually steel coated with a polyurethane material and not rubber at all. As part of the US safety regulations, the ride height was increased and various other suspension modifications were carried out, including the addition of an extra leaf in the rear suspension, and the anti-roll bar was strengthened. The engine and radiator was also repositioned. The overdrive switch was moved to the top of the gear stick, and the dashboard was revised with 80mm speedometer and rev counter. Many people believe that all rubber bumper GTs had the much revised dashboard with the heater controls in the centre console, but this was to come later, and the fascia of early rubber bumper cars was very similar to the chrome bumper cars. It is quite sad that the rubber bumper cars are seen by many as the poor relation of the chrome bumper cars, as I reckon both have their strengths, and whilst chrome bumper cars do command a premium, rubber bumper cars do represent a great way of getting into Mgb-Gt ownership. Sadly, despite the changes made to both MGB models, the extra weight of the GT meant that US emissions tests became difficult to pass, and so GT exports to the US stopped at the end of the 1974 model year. 1975 saw the launch of the Jubilee Special Edition GT in the home market. This car was based on a standard 1800 4-cylinder rubber bumper model finished in racing green, but was enhanced by V8-style alloy wheels finished in gold, distinctive onboard graphics, and a special numbered fascia plate. In all, 751 Jubilees were produced, 750 of which found buyers, and one was destroyed in a TV stunt. The car remains very popular, and there is a thriving Jubilee community. By June 1976, with the 70s in full swing, the dashboard for right-hand drive cars was significantly revised. Main changes included smaller speedometer and rev counter, separate oil pressure and temperature gauges, and the heater control in the centre console, together with an analog clock, and even seatbelt warning lights. This design remained the same until the end of production in 1980. The other very obvious change in the 1977 model year was the introduction of so-called deck chair seats, available in silver and grey or orange and brown. Not the trim I would choose, but it's definitely bold and in period. Production continued through 1978, with only minor changes including some retooling, as it was anticipated that British Leyland would make the more modern O-Series engine available for the MGB in its replacement. This engine change would undoubtedly have extended the life of the MGB and would have improved both performance and emissions. Sadly, as with many decisions made by the heavily Triumph-biased management, Triumph won the internal sports car battle, despite the MG brand being much stronger both at home and overseas. The last throw of the dice for the Mgb-Gt was the introduction of the LE or limited edition, only available in pewter and featuring stylish graphics, a chin spoiler and special alloys that were also used on the Triumph Stag. Just 580 Mgb-Gt LEs were produced between August and October 1980, although many were not sold until January 1981. Poignantly, the last GT rolled off the production line on the 22nd of October 1980, 15 years almost to the day since its launch. This final Mgb-Gt LE is now at the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. So, in summary, over its 15-year production life, the GT sold more than 125,000 units, with just over half staying in the home market. As a coupe, it more than fulfilled its objectives as the poor man's Aston Martin, and luckily for us, is still well supported by several suppliers. So 60 years after its launch, and 45 years since production stopped, you can still buy pretty much any part you need, including even a new body shell. So our beloved GT will continue to be seen on our roads for many years to come. If you've enjoyed the video, we'd really appreciate it if you give it a like, share it with anyone that's interested, and also subscribe to the channel. It really helps the YouTube algorithm get our content to new viewers. Also, we love reading the comments. We do try to respond to every one, so please let us know what you think. As always, many thanks for watching, and take care.